Hey mama, so as we know, labor can be a challenging experience, but sometimes we make it harder than it has to be. Here are 7 ways that you're making your labor harder than it has to be. The very first one, this one is very common with first-time moms, and it's going to the hospital way too early. You know, the excitement, you're so excited to meet your baby, you're like, I hope everything is going okay. All of that just leads to you packing your bags and heading to the hospital sooner than you should be going. And the reason why this makes your labor potentially harder than it would have otherwise been is because most times that change in environments, you know, going from your home to the car to the hospital, all of that getting checked can make you start to feel less comfortable and basically just slow down the process. So you might have been at home and things were progressing very smoothly. You know, the contractions were getting stronger, they were getting more frequent, and then you get to the hospital and it just stops. And that's just because your body is just confused. You might not feel as safe, even if it's subconsciously. And so it slows down and it will end up making your labor longer than it would have been if you had stayed at home to let things establish more. So the best way to avoid this mistake is to stay at home for as long as you can, especially if you don't live too far from the hospital. Wait until the labor has progressed well, the contractions are very frequent, and then you can go to the hospital because it will be less likely at that point for things to slow down or stop. The next one goes hand in hand with this, and it's not resting during the early stages of labor. Again, all that excitement, you've done a lot of preparation, you know, studying and all of that, and you want to put it into good use. This is also very common with first-time moms. And so your contractions start, you're not even sure if the contractions are real, but maybe you go for a walk, you know, you're bouncing on the ball, you're doing all the things, which are good things, but you're doing them too early. The best thing to do in the very early stages of labor is to sleep if you can. If you can't sleep, you should still try to rest. Only stand up and start moving when you're restless, you know, or the pain is too much that you need to start managing it. For as long as you can ignore those contractions, ignore them, because it will make your labor seem shorter and you keep your energy up, because towards the end, that's when you're going to need your energy. And from what I've experienced, a lot of moms, when they decide that they want to get the epidural, it's not necessarily because they feel like they cannot manage the pain, but it's because they're so tired, they're so sleepy, they've been in labor for a long time. So absolutely try to rest, keep your strength up in the early stages, and sleep if you can. Another way you're making your labor harder than it has to be is by not moving or changing positions. I have not seen any mom who, from my experience anyway, who has felt like the contractions were more manageable when they stayed on their back or when they just stayed lying down. A lot of the time when you're moving, you're changing positions, it would usually help you feel like you can manage the pain better. When you're moving in a rhythmic pattern, you know, you're doing the different positions that are known to help baby to move, positions that will help with back pain, with labor pain. Those are ways that you can manage your pain naturally. And even if you're planning to get the epidural, it's still a good idea to learn some of the ways you can move, the positions you can try to help your labor progress and to help you manage the pain, because without it, it will be much more painful than it has to be. This next point is a big one, and it's not choosing the right team. And that begins with the doctor or midwife that you choose. You need to make sure that you have someone who you feel comfortable with, who trusts you and your ability to have that baby, and who you also trust, because that aspect of trust, mutual trust, is very important during labor. When you don't feel comfortable, when you're feeling judged, when you're feeling uncared for, it actually can slow down your labor and make it more painful. When you feel like you're in a safe space, it would help the pain to reduce because you would be more relaxed, and the more relaxed you are, the faster things will progress. But this also goes along with preparing your partner to know how best to support you during labor, considering hiring a doula to help you to manage the pain. Just overall surrounding yourself with people who will support you, because the time will come during labor when you might start to not believe in yourself, you might start to doubt the whole thing, and at those points in time, that's when your team is supposed to come together to help you to pull through, to encourage you, to suggest things that might be helpful for you. But if instead of doing this, your team is maybe judging you, telling you to stop yelling, or just undermining your strength, you are not going to feel as comfortable, and then you just emotionally you're not coping well, and then physically too, because your emotional state affects your physical state, and so the whole experience would just be a lot more difficult than it had to be. Another one that's also very common is not eating during labor, especially if you're hungry and you feel like you could do with something to eat. Sometimes the hospital will tell you that you're not allowed to eat. And the reason for this is to prevent aspiration, which is if you need to go for an emergency C-section and they need to put you completely under, there's a risk of you inhaling the content of your stomach into your lungs. And so that's why they prevent you from eating. But if your pregnancy and your labor is low risk and there's little chance of you needing to have an emergency C-section, then eating during labor should be fine, and it could the risk in those situations are much less than the reward. Because when you're tired, you're hungry, your body is not at an optimal state, and so you want to make sure you have your energy up, you're drinking water, you're eating, snacking on eating snacks and all of that, especially if you feel like it. If you feel nauseous and you really just don't want to eat, that's a different case. In that case, you can just drink water or have some electrolyte, but don't starve yourself deliberately, because it could make things harder than it has to be. Another way you're making your labor hard is by not learning ways to ease tension and relax. And this is natural ways, because there's some times when you're even when you've gotten to the hospital, maybe the anesthesiologist is attending to somebody else, or they're setting you up to be able to get your epidural, or just the beginning stages where you're not able to get that epidural. Even if you wanted to get the epidural, there will still be time where you would have to manage the pain by yourself. But especially for people who want to have a completely unmedicated birth, this is absolutely important, because there are tricks and tips that are available out there to help you to manage the pain and to help you to relax. If you don't know about this beforehand, during labor you'd be confused. That's not the time that you would want to be researching all of these things. And so you might be struggling so much, but there is an easy way to help you to relax and help you to reduce that pain. So it's very, very important that no matter the kind of birth you're planning, to just take a few moments to learn some natural ways that you can manage your pain. Write it down, and so during labor you can just refer to it and try it out and see if it helps you. The final way that you're making your labor absolutely harder than it has to be is by not knowing what to expect. If you go into labor blindly, you will be afraid, because you're like, is this supposed to be happening? Is this supposed to be happening? And that's putting an extra level of emotional torture, as opposed to you knowing that, yeah, this is challenging, this is painful, but this is normal, so then you only have to deal with the physical pain. But when also in your mind you're afraid if something is going wrong, if your baby is okay, if this should be happening, that's an extra layer of suffering that you're adding to yourself. So it's very, very important to know what to expect, the different stages of labor, because everybody's labor is different, but generally it has a pattern. So knowing that pattern, knowing the things that can happen in those patterns, knowing what options may be provided to you during labor, and just basically going into it prepared, can really be the difference between a terrible birth experience and one that's manageable, even if you still experienced pain. But just because you know what's going to be happening, you're not afraid, and so you can just take things in stride and know that this is just part of the journey. I hope you found this helpful. I'd love to hear from you in the comments if you have any other tips or tricks that made your labor easier for you, so that other mamas can see it and hopefully it helps them out as well. Bye.